Welcome to CA UIM 8.4, New Features. In this video, we'll take a look at the new Monitoring Configuration Service, MCS, and how to use it within UIM. First, let's listen to an overview discussion, and then take a step-by-step look at how to configure it within the USM interface.
The one biggest change that we made was to a piece of software that we call the Monitoring Configuration Service. One of the big areas that this added, the motivation for doing this was about making administrators far more efficient. So what the Monitoring Configuration Service enables is the ability to do a much more bulk configuration of monitoring. So where previously sometimes there were other methods for doing this, you'd have to go in and change interfaces, you could take and deploy probes or configurations for monitoring to specific individual devices. This is making it far more group-oriented. So now when there's a configuration of monitoring that we wish to deploy, we go in, and just as an aside, we do this now from within USM. It's not a matter of context switching and going either to the admin console or to infrastructure manager. Directly from within USM, we choose the group that we want to monitor. Of course, we can be looking at the metrics or any other part of that specific group or device, and then we switch over to a monitoring configuration tab. We click that tab, and now we see all of the configuration in terms of the way that that device now is going to be monitored, or that group. So where it's most powerful, of course, is when we use it for configuration of the group. And what we're able to do is, again, set up a large set of configurations and have the system automatically deploy them to that set. So the benefits here are really that it's about adding that efficiency that we talked about. It's also much more intuitive in terms of the mechanism that's being used. So now for that administrator that's both looking at how the metrics are flowing in and how the metrics are being gathered and perhaps looking at alerts, they now also can quickly toggle over without starting another tool and take a look at how it's being monitored and then make modifications directly within that context. So it's a much more tight closed loop process than it's been in the past. Much easier to learn as well. We've made a lot of usability improvement to help improve this and make it highly usable. So we'll be continuing to do that with other parts of the product, but specifically this one did go through several rounds of usability testing. And as always, because of the fact that this is able to deploy to large numbers of devices, it really does help with that scale, making it so it's possible to deploy to those much larger numbers. So let me show you now the functionality, what this actually looks like. So as you can see, this is just a layout of USM. And in USM here, we select the group. I'm kind of going to start with the leftmost, kind of work around this. We choose the specific group, as I talked about, that we want to monitor from. And now you'll notice that there's a monitoring tab, that second one in the center, that second call-out in the center. There's a monitoring tab. When that's selected, we now move to the center. That center tab will be populated and shows all the different types of monitoring that we might want to apply. Now note, it's being listed as types of monitoring, the types of things we want to do. So as you can see, the one that's highlighted is CPU monitoring. This doesn't require the user to be familiar with what probe is specifically being used. It allows you to choose the task that needs to be completed and then configure appropriately. So in this case, we choose from the list of the different monitoring that can be applied. In this case, we've chosen CPU monitoring. And on the right, we see all of the configuration options. Now note, there are a couple advantages as well to the way that that's been structured. First of all, as the call-out is listing there, it does allow you to populate that with effectively best practices. There are defaults there that if we just apply that, you'll get somewhat more automatic monitoring by just using the quaz values and the thresholds that we've recommended. At this point, if we were to click on that Create button, this profile would be created and would start being deployed across tens or hundreds or thousands of different devices that need to be deployed. Now, the one other thing I just wanted to note was that with this system, it is possible to make exceptions. So for instance, if you had a bunch of Windows servers and you wanted those Windows servers to all have their CPUs monitored and have an alarm set when perhaps the threshold for CPU is at 80%. So at 80%, you'd be getting alarms. But there's one device that's particularly sensitive that's perhaps running your Exchange server. And when it gets above 70%, then it's problematic, and you want to be alerted for that. So using this exact same mechanism, we would drill down further, and rather than deploying the policy to the group, we can apply it to the individual element. So the individual will always override the group to give you the ability to make those specific tunings and changes to that one specific device. One final final feature worth noting is just that once one of these profiles is created and it exists, it's possible to take it and reapply it elsewhere. So for instance, if you had, rather than a broad Windows group, if you had perhaps your database servers and you wrote a policy or a profile that was for monitoring that, and then you wish to apply something similar but not identical to perhaps Exchange servers, you could take and copy that profile and then reapply it to the Exchange server after making some small number of tweaks. So we've really made it a whole lot more modular and made it a whole lot simpler for you to apply either similar or identical monitoring across a much larger group of devices, and brought this all into the same context as where the monitoring occurs from. Now, I do want to talk about the probes that this currently is supporting. We, of course, behind the scenes, even though we're not exposing it this way, there are probes that are backing this, that are responsible for the monitoring and providing those alerts and quas messages up to the system. In this case, with the initial release, we do have a limited number of probes that we're supporting. So these were selected based upon what was most popular and what we were able to accomplish in the time that we had in order to get this out and get people using it. So we made some choices, some difficult choices, and had to draw some lines. We do have our next release will have many more probes that are supported, and we expect to eventually get the entire probe estate underneath this umbrella so that all configuration will occur this way. So we've got a lot of popular features here, or a lot of popular probes that we have covered. There are more that will be coming. The one other thing that's worth noting, for those of you that will be using this or giving it a try, I talked about being able to override a single device by going in and making modifications to its profile. And that's certainly what we recommend. However, if you want to make modifications and you make them outside of this system, using something other than MCS, let's say you went into either Admin Console or used Infrastructure Manager, this system will dominate. So if you make a change outside, it will be transient. It will last for a very short period of time until it's reapplied. So there really has to be, for the probes that are listed here, has to be a choice as to which mechanism you want to use to configure it. You can either configure it using using MCS, and from that point forward it will be configured using MCS, or it can be configured manually. The two can't coincide. MCS is all or nothing in terms of using it for these specific probes. Now, of course, you can turn it off and not continue to use MCS if you change your mind later. But once MCS has taken control, it's going to continue asserting its dominance and reapplying those profiles at every opportunity so that it keeps the system all in sync and that everything is configured the way that's shown in MCS. So that's just an important note if you go ahead and try that.
Now that you have a good understanding of the MCS key features and benefits, let's talk about a few key concepts, and then watch as our administrator steps through the configuration for a Windows CPU. First, let's define some new terminology. The first definition is device type. This is applicable to group profiles, and is used to define devices within a group. Here you'll define a specific type of device that will be used as the model for the application of the monitoring configuration profile through the group. Profile types, or profiles, are the monitoring configuration that you want to apply. This is the foundation of where the monitoring configuration begins. Another term could be template. We now have a new CDM probe with the installation, or upgrade to 8.4. In the archive you will see CDM 5.61, MC. This is a silent probe with no default enabled, so that you can determine what is needed within the MCS configuration. Be sure to look for additional information in the product documentation on the wiki. There is also a new ACL that will be called the USM Monitoring Configuration Service. This ACL is very critical for MCS permissioning. If a user does not have this ACL applied, the monitoring tab within the USM group, or within the device, will not be visible. Without this, you will not have the benefits of MCS. These are the steps our administrator will be taking to configure a Windows CPU monitor. Create a group. Add the device type. Navigate to the device. Create monitoring profiles. And then copy the profiles to a group. To begin, one of the most important concepts within MCS, and to be able to apply configuration, is ensuring that the devices that you want to monitor within that group have a robot installed. If a robot is not installed on a group, you'll see this error message. No device model is available for this group. If you select a device to configure, and it does not have a robot, you'll only see a blank screen. This will give you the indication that there is no robot, and nothing that you'll be able to configure. You must add a robot to continue. Our administrator has now created a group, deployed a series of robots, and has selected a device type. Again, this is the model where all of the profiles represent what can be done to the devices in this group. Remember that this is at an IP device level. So this is an important concept to remember if you have an environment, for example, of a mixed system of Linux and Windows, and could have some conflict on applying the profiles, because Linux systems don't have C drives, they use a /. Now that we have a group configured, and it has a robot, we can begin the initial configuration. We'll be prompted to select a device type. And you can see in the middle pane, there is only that option to configure. Once we've selected the device type, we'll see that all of the profile types are populated. These are all the options that you're able to configure for monitoring for a specific device for a specific group. Notice that there are highlighted and grayed out systems. The highlighted systems indicate that the probe of the associated profile is in the local archive, and has a valid license. If those two criteria are not met, it will be italicized and grayed out. If you have the probe locally, but the license has expired, it will also be grayed out. Here you can see the administrator has created a Windows CPU monitor profile, and selected a couple of items to monitor: CPU usage, CPU system, and the alarm threshold with the definition, and threshold being critical percentage. Notice the two profiles in the middle pane, CPU and memory profiles. Since these are the profiles that were just created, they were moved to the top of the list of available profiles. This will also be the case for a group, or device type. Now that the profile has been configured, we'll copy that profile to the group that we want to apply it to. To do this, the administrator will use the Profile Administration area, located at the bottom of the third pane. Check the box to initiate the copy process. A new window appears and the target can be selected from the drop-down menu. A device can be selected, but for this scenario, our administrator will select copying to a group. A new box appears, allowing us to make the group choice. Here's where the device type and robots come into play. Only the groups that have a device type defined will show up in this list. So here, you can see that even though we are working in the Windows group, it's not part of this list because Windows group does not have a device type identified. Our administrator was able to configure a single device monitoring profile, however, he's not able to copy it to that group. So he'll select, and copy to, New Group 1. And New Group 1 has 4 systems in it. You can see in the third pane, that this profile has been copied, and at the bottom, the deployment status to track it, to see if the profile has been deployed through the group. Let's move to a device within the group. Here we can see that this profile was derived from the group. This will also indicate from what probe, and when it was deployed, and if it was successfully deployed. For more detailed information about how to use MCS in UIM 8.4, refer to the documentation wiki, or visit the UIM community to join in the discussion. The links can also be found in the YouTube description located below this video.